No, Robbie. Come on. Look at the camera. Okay. Hi everyone, my name is Maya and this is my pet gorilla Harambe, and welcome to the first video on my YouTube channel. Recently, I've been having a lot of conversations around the idea of getting more women into STEM. I would call myself a scientist, although I guess I'm not in like the hard STEM fields like math or computer science. And I just wanted to give my 2 cents on why I don't think there's enough women in STEM. So I decided to take a look at the literature about women in STEM and kind of just give you my thoughts. For those of you that aren't familiar with STEM, it's an acronym that stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics. And it's a huge field that's been booming since the 70s. So just to give you guys a current look at the status of women in STEM, in the world, women account for 29% of specialists employed in STEM. They hold less than 25% of STEM jobs. The STEM gap is happening in college too, where women hold a disproportionate amount of STEM degrees, particularly in engineering. And the gap continues to postgraduate degrees, postdoctoral careers, as well as tenure track positions. In 2016, women made up only 41% of doctoral degree recipients, 32% of postdoctoral fellows, and 37% of faculty in STEM fields. So clearly there's something going on. There seems to be a dearth of women in STEM, and this gap has persisted ever since this need for engineering and technology. Now, there's a lot of reasons that people have proposed for why there's not enough women in STEM and how to get women back in STEM. So I wanted to look at what the data said about why women aren't going into STEM, as well as some of women's personal experiences in STEM and why these experiences might cause them to drop out of STEM, not take on a STEM major, or never even think of the idea of becoming a scientist. And you might be asking, why is this an important issue? And that's a good point. I think that everyone should be allowed to go into the profession that they want to go into, but I do think there's an issue when there is a pattern of women that show that they're interested in STEM and have a passion for STEM, yet are repeatedly saying that they don't feel comfortable in STEM, feel bullied out of STEM, don't get treated properly at the places that they're working at or the universities that they're teaching at, and eventually end up just quitting STEM and going into other careers in higher rates than we do see for men that have careers in STEM. I'm all for personal choice, but when it feels like a particular sex is being discriminated against, then that's an issue, and I think that needs to be addressed. So why don't women want to go into STEM? Let's look at what the science says. Well, first, let's answer what I know people are going to say. I know there are going to be people that say,
oh, well, women are just bad at math. Men are a lot better at doing these technical things.
Let's look at what the science says to actually see if this holds true. Most studies report that young women are no less qualified than their male counterparts in STEM. Females perform comparably to men across all STEM fields. And even in some specific STEM courses, like life and physical science courses, women actually had statistically higher grades than men and statistically higher GPAs than men. So this whole idea or concept that women are just not good at math, they're not good at science, falls completely flat when you realize that we're doing just fine. We've gotten the similar grades or even better. We have a good chance of scoring the same on certain aptitude tests, and there's no real evidence that there's a perceived difference between the two genders when it comes to STEM performance. However, some studies did pick up a difference in perception. Women tend to have a lower self-confidence in themselves, particularly in STEM concepts. One study surveyed different classes of people across a variety of STEM classes at a university and found that even though women were on average performing better than men on those tests and had a higher grade in the class, women and men were both preferentially more likely to seek out a male student to help them with a difficult concept that they didn't understand than they were to seek out a female student. And often women tend to pretend like they're not really that good at math or science in order to seem more desirable and attractive to smarter male students in the class. This perception gap extends into high school as well, where we see high school boys express more competence in science and math, while girls express more confidence in subjects like English. So we can see it consistently across the board from high school up until undergraduate that women feel this lower sense of confidence when it comes to their personal performance on math and science, whereas men express more confidence. And this self-confidence is important because if you don't feel like you're good at math or science, then you're less likely to go into a very STEM-heavy job because you want to go into something that you feel like you're good at. And if women on average are reporting that they're constantly feeling not adequate enough, despite the fact that research has shown that there really is no difference between the aptitude of both genders, that's an issue. And this perception is not just within women, it's also how other men and women perceive other women in STEM. A number of studies have actually shown that parents and teachers will underestimate a girl's ability in math and science classes while overestimating abilities of boys in math and science classes, despite the fact that they're receiving similar grades. A lot of teachers also encourage boys to explore their mathematical and scientific pursuit more than they do for girls. So basically, this can be summed up as women don't feel confident in their mathematical and scientific capabilities, whereas men feel super confident and they're kind of egged on by their teachers and parents to be like, hey, yeah, you are really good at science and math. Whereas women are kind of made to feel like, oh, I don't know if this is for me. This seems really hard. Not really getting a lot of encouragement from my teachers. Now, keep in mind that this is not a universal case. I know that there's STEM schools that cater specifically men and women that are really interested in STEM and they nourish that. This is just research done on a couple of studies that have shown that there are different attitudes that parents and teachers will take towards girls and boys when it comes to science and math. Now, another reason why women might just not choose to go into STEM is because of something called the chilly climate. And this is a term coined by researchers to refer to just a very unwelcoming environment that is kind of created by a lot of STEM fields. And this can be due to a lot of different things. A chilly climate includes anything from a negative classroom environment, teachers that aren't really very friendly, favoritism, sexual harassment, a lack of financial or mental support, failure to be recognized for your own contributions, subtle biases like the ones that I talked about before. And this outward perception doesn't just deal with boys and girls are in school, but also goes all the way up to women in STEM with professional careers. For example, one study in 2014 looked at female and male candidates that had to complete a mathematical task for the job that they were applying for. And even though some of these female and male candidates scored the exact same on the mathematical task, male candidates were still twice as likely to be selected than their female counterparts. And even when it comes to jobs, when male and female applicants have the same exact application materials, the faculty rated the female student as less competent and hireable. So clearly there's an issue with perception. Even before high school to professional men and women in STEM careers, there seems to be this perception outward and inwards that women are just not good at STEM, even though research has already shown that that's not the case. And this doesn't help when a chilly climate is already present in most STEM fields. And all of these factors just create a really unwelcoming climate that no one would really want to work in. So we have the pre-existence of a chilly climate, and we have these kind of misguided perceptions about women and their aptitude in STEM. How does it affect women in college pursuing STEM? And how does it affect women with professional careers in STEM? We see that even women pursuing STEM degrees in undergraduate are still facing a lot of the same issues about perception and bias that they faced in high school. A lot of these women have a lack in financial aid, and I feel like this is a universal problem for many college students, but it's certainly also a prominent issue for undergraduate women pursuing STEM careers. That negative inward and outward perception of just not feeling like you're good enough, and then having other teachers and parents kind of encourage the idea that you're not good enough never helps. Some studies reported that a lot of students felt like STEM professors were really cold and uncaring, not very sympathetic to the students, and that doesn't make you more eager to continue into STEM. For example, I didn't have the best math teachers in middle school and high school, and I did horribly at math, and for a while I thought that I was just really bad at math. It wasn't until my first year in college where I had an amazing calculus professor that made me realize that I actually was really good at math and I really liked math. But because I had teachers before that just made me hate math so much, I just felt like I wasn't good at math. And I think a lot of it was just because I didn't like math. I also just didn't enjoy doing practice problems. But I think that if I had had a very welcoming and guiding teacher that made me passionate about math like my calc professor did in college, then I probably just would have really continued hating math. A lot of students also talk about the weed out system, where there's like these huge biology or mathematics mathematics classes where there's like often 300 and 400 students, and the purpose is to just kind of like weed out all the people that basically aren't smart enough. And so these classes are often just huge classes where the professor just realistically doesn't have enough time to really cater to every student's interest. The exams are often really hard. The course is often only based on a couple of exams. There's usually not a lot of opportunity to build a connection with your professor. And when you have to take those classes as a first year, when you're still trying to figure out what you're trying to major in, it can kind of make you feel like you're not really cut out for STEM. And another huge issue is the absence of female role models. A lot of women in undergraduate report that they just don't really see female role models in STEM to kind of look up to. That plays a huge role. If you're really interested in STEM, but you don't see any professional women in STEM as role models or mentors for you, then that can seem kind of alienating and it can make you feel alone. And that, coupled with perceptions and biases about your own aptitude in STEM, can make you drop out of the major entirely. So those are some issues that undergraduate women in STEM experience. What about when you get to a professional level? Unfortunately, it doesn't really get better from college. Women in STEM careers report that they have to work long hours and that there's no work-life balance, and that trying to juggle having a family while also working on your career is next to impossible. They also report that there's no opportunity for advancement, they feel very limited in what they can do, and they also report the same feelings of being in a really chilly work environment where they feel underappreciated, undervalued, and very unwelcome. You also have to keep in mind that a lot of women want to start a family. When you put it into perspective, if you're working a STEM job where you're working long hours, you're overcommitting to your job, and you have no work-life balance, it's just really, really hard to start a family. In a study that surveyed 15 different women that were professionals in STEM but had left, one woman reported that she took 6 months off for a baby and that it was hard to come back. People who have families sometimes are seen as worse scientists, i.e. they don't work hard enough, only 8 hours a day and not 12 to 14. When she first had a son, she was working hard at trying to combine work and family, but nevertheless, she was seen as someone who was not doing a good enough job. And if we look at the statistics, being married and also having young children predicted increased rates of engineering employment for men, but actually decreased rates of engineering employment for women. The odds of a STEM woman leaving her professional career after marriage is 84%, while that odds increase is not significant for other professional women in non-STEM related careers. Having children is a big part of your life, but it disproportionately affects women in STEM professional careers versus women in non-STEM professional careers. And having a second child results in a 395% increase in the odds of a woman in STEM leaving the labor force. So we can see that all the way from undergraduate to women in STEM in professional careers, there continues to be this chilly climate, and it's just hard to start a family, and many women end up quitting STEM careers because they want to either focus on starting a family, or they get stressed out and they have no work-life balance, or they just feel like there's no opportunity for advancement in an already unwelcoming environment. Now let's talk about another big issue, retention. Retention deals with retaining the women that we already have in STEM. So I think that we're doing a good job at pushing women into STEM, but the problem is a lot of these women are leaving, and they're leaving in higher droves than they are for men. And this is something that people have called the leaky pipeline, where we're kind of pushing these women into STEM, but higher and higher in their academic career, they just, start falling out for a variety of reasons. One study found that after 12 years, 50% of women who originally worked in STEM had exited and were now working in other non-STEM related fields, whereas only 20% of professional women do the same. People that work in STEM are significantly more likely to move out of STEM related fields to work in non-STEM related fields. Basically, the studies show that women in STEM are dramatically more likely to leave their STEM related fields in order to pursue other non-STEM related fields. It's important to note that these women aren't just leaving the workforce because they're retiring. They are choosing to work, they just don't want to work in STEM. We can even see that in undergraduate, women are more likely to switch out of STEM majors into other majors in humanities and law. So we can see that even when we're kind of encouraging and pushing women into STEM, it's not really working, because a lot of them are just leaving in droves because they're either dissatisfied, there's no work-life balance, they're not being compensated enough, or they're just living in a very chilly work environment. Now, you may be hearing what I'm saying and thinking, wait, there's a lot of women in biology and health science though. Doesn't that account for something? And you're actually right, it does. And that brings up another interesting question. Is the STEM gap consistent across all STEM fields? And the answer is actually no. Women are actually pretty well represented, and even in some fields, overrepresented in biological and life sciences. In 2009, women made up about 40% of the workforce in physical and life science fields. And in college, over half of female STEM majors major in biological and life sciences. And this translates to after graduation too, because women are now earning over 50% of bachelor's and master's degrees in biomedical and social sciences. In terms of medicine, women make up 48% of all medical degrees as well. So where we're seeing this dearth in women in engineering and in mathematics and computer science, we're actually seeing a pretty fair and almost overrepresentation of women in biological, life sciences, and social sciences. But wait, why are women more likely to go into these biological fields than they are to go into computer science or mathematical fields? So a study in 2016 actually looked into this, and they defined jobs on a spectrum on whether they were more people-oriented or more thing-oriented. So for example, people-oriented jobs are jobs that revolve around socializing and interacting with people, whether it's talking with people, working in teams and groups and communicating. That is what kind of defines a people-oriented job. Whereas a thing-oriented job obviously deals more with interacting with things like tools, machinery, fixing things, taking things apart, putting them back together. And so these researchers basically looked at a bunch of STEM careers as well as some other careers and ranked them on a scale as to how people-oriented they were versus how thing-oriented they were. For example, a study done in 2013 looked to see if women or men were more interested in people or thing-oriented jobs. And they found that females consistently preferred people-oriented jobs, whereas men consistently preferred thing-oriented jobs. Another study done in 2016 looked at a bunch of college-bound female and male high school graduates and surveyed them again 10 years later. Amongst their many findings, they found that females put more emphasis on having a good work-life balance, starting a family, wanting to have children, while males put more value on making more money, getting promotions, and seeking high-risk jobs. They also found that valuing working with things predicted men going into STEM more so than females. It seems like women have a stronger preference for a more social environment where they seem to be interacting with a lot more people, whereas men seem to be mostly concerned with thing-oriented jobs like working with tools or different technologies, and also are more interested in pursuing higher risk jobs and having a higher status job. And overall, when you think about it, STEM fields are a lot more thing-oriented than people-oriented, right? Because when you're in a STEM-oriented field, a lot of the times the picture of it is kind of just being a worker in a lab and looking at things under a microscope or fiddling around with some technology. And those seem to be more thing-oriented jobs that men preferentially seem to be more drawn to, whereas women who have already reported feeling isolated in their STEM jobs seem to lean towards a more social environment where they can see that they're making more of a social impact for the greater good of the people. So as a result, women are more likely to be less interested in STEM just because it doesn't really reflect their overall interests. And once again, I'm saying that this is not a blanket statement. I know there's women who love working with technology and love working in lab, but there's also a lot of women that don't enjoy that and would rather socialize with other people or actively feel like they're doing something for the greater good. And that's not to say that STEM jobs are not doing something for the greater good, because they obviously are. But when you're in a lab day in and day out, and I don't know, maybe you're working with fruit flies, it's hard to get that direct sense of connection that what you're doing is going to affect the greater good, whereas female nurses or doctors feel like they're making more of a change in their day-to-day activities. And even though STEM isn't very people-oriented in general, women tend to actually gravitate to the more people-oriented fields in STEM, like biology and life sciences. Girls who use science consistently try to use it in more social ways. We see a lot of women interested in science communication, where they feel like they're doing a more active part to encourage science education in in the world, and a lot of women tend to enter scientific fields with the goal of teaching or educating others about those fields rather than actually pursuing research. So all these kinds of findings kind of suggest that women tend to be more interested in people-oriented jobs and men seem to be interested in more thing-oriented jobs. And because of that, women are more likely to take on more people-oriented jobs, like for example, psychologists or therapists or social workers, whereas men seem to be more interested in thing-oriented jobs like IT or computer science. And this isn't a bad thing. This just comes down to personal gender choices and the things that you're interested in. If you're a female and you're not interested in staying in a lab or, fixing technology, then you're not going to be interested in being an engineer or a technician. And if you're a man and you don't really have good social skills and you don't like working with people, then you're not going to be interested in being a therapist or doing a job that involves daily interaction with people. And we also see that women that are interested in STEM but are also still interested in people-oriented careers seem to gravitate more to biological and life science careers where there is more of that social aspect, which is why these biological and life science fields seem more attractive to women that are interested in STEM because they appeal to their altruistic social preferences. Another reason why the STEM gap isn't consistent across all STEM fields has to do with mathematical and verbal abilities between men and women. Studies have shown that even though women are mathematically capable, they'll often still choose to go into non-STEM fields. One study found that women in college that are mathematically competent still seem to switch their STEM majors into an equally challenging non-STEM major such as law, more likely than mathematically competent male students. It's also been reported that a lot of women have higher verbal capabilities than men, and so women that are mathematically and verbally capable tend to actually not go into STEM, but tend to actually just go into non-STEM related fields. But why is this the case? Why are women that are great at math and English still choosing to opt out of STEM? Well, this could be because of a variety of reasons, and one of those reasons could be that if a woman is good at math and she's also good at a variety of different fields, then she need not limit herself to STEM. She could go into any field she wants to based on what she's interested in. She could just opt to go into another field because that's what she's genuinely interested in and she has more options available to her. Whereas many men who have really high math abilities but not so great verbal abilities tend to just stick with STEM because they're limited to the choices that they can take. Women also have a penchant for altruism and family values, and this trickles down to their career preferences too. Women want to know that they can have a family and also have a work-life balance, but are also willing to make more sacrifices to do that, whereas this doesn't really seem to factor that much into men's career goals and plans. Some men who maybe aren't so verbally inclined but really mathematically talented see STEM as a way that they can excel and do really, really great. Now, I'm not saying that men are these like cold-hearted creatures that just like to be hunched in a lab or typing away at a computer and they only care about money and status. And I'm also not saying that women are these social butterflies doing things for the betterment of society. I'm just saying that there's gender differences in careers, and I think it's important to acknowledge this. And I don't think that it's fair to just say that we all have the same interests and that we all should be interested in STEM. No, people have different interests, and it's important to recognize those interests. So now we've looked at if the STEM gap is consistent across STEM fields. And we know that there's not because there's gender differences in the types of careers that men and women are interested in. But that doesn't solve the issue of why there's not enough women going into STEM. The fact of the matter is that women are just as qualified as men in STEM fields. They still show a lot of interest in STEM fields, particularly in biological and life sciences. But they're still facing a lot of alienation, a chilly climate, no room for advancement, and perception issues. Gender differences exist, but I'm also saying that it shouldn't overshadow the fact that women that are interested in STEM, even if they're interested in the more people-oriented STEM field, they're still being pushed out in droves, and that's still a problem. So what's the solution to all of this? How do we push women back into STEM? Let me propose some solutions. Let's start off with young girls. I think that young girls need to be exposed to female role models in STEM, as well as mentors. Many studies have shown that the presence of female role models and mentors results in women feeling a lot more in tune with their STEM identity, a lot more encouraged to continue and persist in STEM fields. And these role models don't even have to be women. Male role models that really encourage females into STEM can also be a solution to this issue. Having good, positive interactions with professors, professors, faculty members, other people outside the industry can all make you feel like you belong more and give you more motivation to continue on. Because the fact of the matter is that STEM is not easy. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of dedication, and it's a lot of hours put into something that hopefully you love and enjoy. I think we also need to enforce a more growth mindset. Like I said, a lot of women feel like they're not good at math, but I think we need to enforce that you don't need to be the best student in your math class. If you really enjoy math, then work on that and practice and know that you can grow from there and you can become a better math student. Now, how do we support STEM women in their professional careers? I think that we need to place a bigger emphasis on paid maternity leaves as well as career breaks. A lot of institutions are moving towards allowing career breaks and sabbaticals so that women can just take time off and work on their family or other projects or have children or get married. And I think this is great because we're always talking about how to have a work-life balance, and this can be really tough for women. So lessening the load by having extended maternity leaves and having career breaks will allow women to feel more comfortable and confident that they can come back to their job after starting a family and not feel like they're not a hard enough worker. A lot of institutions have now actually offered funding for women that are going on career breaks or offer fellowships where they can be financially supported during their career breaks. STEM careers can be particularly stressful, especially when you want to start a family or get married. I also think that we would just benefit from having a really warm, inviting climate or environment instead of the very chilly climate that we've created of these very cold scientists and professors that don't really care about you, aren't really invested in their students. I think that attitude needs to change, especially if we want to spark innovation and creations. So in conclusion, I think women need better role models in STEM. I think that we need better maternity leave, healthcare and childcare, better work-life balance. However, I want to stress that I don't think that we should be really like forcing women into STEM and having this huge push, and that we should be trying to get anyone that's interested in anything into STEM. Because the fact of the matter is that some females are just not interested in STEM, just like how some men are not interested in social work or other fields. If women aren't interested in very thing or technical oriented jobs and are more interested in people and socializing and altruistic jobs, then we shouldn't be forcing these women that are very people oriented or do really want to start a family into these highly technical roles that they're not into. We're not forcing men to become nurses. I don't think that we should be forcing women that want to start a family and prioritize having children and socializing with people into highly technical roles. Take for example your own personal interests. If you love to travel and you know that one of the things that you want to do for the rest of your life is to travel, then you're not going to take on a position that basically mandates that you stay in one location for the entire duration of the job. And you shouldn't feel like you need to take on that job. I don't think that we should be forcing women into careers that they're not fully passionate in. However, I do think that we need to be cultivating women's interest in STEM at an early age. And I do think that if a girl does show interest in science or mathematics, then we should cultivate that instead of make them feel like they're not good enough. Kind of focus our attention on the women and girls that are really interested in STEM and that would thrive in those kinds of environments. At the end of the day, this is a complex issue that deals with a lot of different issues like gender biases, perception, men and women's aptitude in STEM field, professional women in STEM, college women in STEM, retention, discrimination in the workforce. And just one video alone cannot do a full deep dive of all of these issues and the history behind the STEM gap. But I hope that by doing this short overview, I can inform my audience as to the fact that yes, there is a STEM gap. And no, it's not because women are worse at STEM than men. Overall, this is a nuanced issue, but I hope that my video can give you some insight as to the real reason why we're seeing this STEM gap and hopefully some solutions as to how we can fix it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more content revolving around science, human evolution, anthropology, and anything about what makes us human, then please make sure to subscribe to this channel and also follow my Instagram for updates, because I will be making more videos soon. Now, me and Harambe are going to take a very well-deserved walk in the jungle, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!